Everybody, this is going to be the first video in a series of videos going over the warrior class's fundamentals. Today we're going to be starting with offensive layers, and we're going to be going through the passive tree and how it introduces those layers to players as you level up throughout the campaign. The first thing I want to talk about is really basic to ARPGs, but it's very important, and it is the idea of increased damage versus more damage. So right out the gate as a warrior, you're going to be looking at nodes that say increased melee damage, increased, I think, fizz damage or area attack area damage, etc. Just anything on the passive tree that says increased is all going to go into one group. So the more of this stat that you get, the less effective it is, essentially. That is different from the wording more damage. More damage is always a multiplier. I might pull up some visuals, but if you're familiar with Balatro, the card game where you stack a bunch of multipliers, increased melee damage is like a plus multiplier, and then more melee damage is like a times multiplier. And when we're talking about the early game warrior tree, for almost every build, for almost every player who's starting out, you're probably going to want to take these 6 points just off rip. It's going to get you almost like 50% increased damage in the early game. If you want to play it a little more safe, the next 4 points you can take are 4 defensives, but we'll save defensives for another video. And then the next 4, again, increased melee damage against heavy stunned enemies, etc. So once you take these 10 points, as a warrior, you're going to be doing double damage in the early game. Super helpful if you're not familiar with like what you're supposed to do on the passive tree. You might accidentally path the strength nodes, skip a bunch of stuff. You might be interested in attack speed up here, etc. But like 100% of the time, I'm probably pathing down these nodes at the start, and then maybe going a different route later on once I have increased damage in different areas of the tree. So that's the little brief overview of increased damage. As soon as you get to this point in the tree, you actually have a few options that introduce new mechanics. Directly to the left, you have more increased damage, but you are introduced to the concept of extra damage. So this says gain 12% of physical damage as extra fire damage. In a similar way to more damage, this is in a separate bucket from increased. So basically, this is going to be 12% more physical damage as fire. If you do 100 damage physical hit, it's going to add 12 fire damage to your attack. Very strong, especially if you're looking to go for some kind of hybrid build. I do believe, and I might get into more in-depth explanations of these mechanics in a future video, but for now, just going to keep it high level. There is some confusion, or there could be some confusion for new players around like where does conversions happen? There are certain things in the game that say 75% of damage converted to fire, right? How would that play with this physical damage as extra fire node? I'm not going to cover that in the video, but just be aware that like I believe extra damage, either extra fire damage or extra cold damage, like fizz as extra fizz damage, any of this stuff, I believe it always benefits the player. So I don't think if you convert, this is going to ruin your damage. But another offensive layer that gets introduced almost immediately is skill speed. Skill speed is basically attack speed as well as, I think, spell cast speed. So this is like the combination of the two. For the warrior class, all you need to know is that it's attack speed. Very strong. Right, again, depending on what you're running, if the attack scales with attack speed, most attacks do. Sometimes you don't really care as much for slam skills, but for strike skills, very important metric for you to kind of like boost. All right, with a few more points on the tree, you get to more increased damage nodes, except these are conditional on your weapon. These nodes in particular make really good weapon set nodes. So basically, if you have a one-handed shield setup, and then your offhand is a two-hander, you can put 5 points or the full 6 points on one weapon set, and then when you weapon swap, swap it to the other skill points here. If you don't really want to worry about that, you can keep pathing down to more generic attack damage down here. But as you continue to path down the tree, you're going to see, again, an introduction of a new mechanic, which is empowered attacks. So for the warrior class and other classes in general, there are ways to empower your attack skills. The easiest way for warriors is using a war cry. So if you have something like Infernal Cry and you use it, it's going to empower a series of attacks. And anything that says empowered attacks deal increased damage is going to benefit from that. This is still in the increased damage pool. As we continue down, we're going to hit a few more notables. Here's a wheel for crit. So crit in this game isn't super important for warriors at the moment. It's fairly hard to get this up. I believe this is probably going to be more important when they introduce either axes or swords to the game. But a change that they did make is that they kind of nerfed Resolute Technique in a way that not every warrior is taking it anymore. So it probably did open up the possibility for scaling crit and crit damage as a warrior build. But for now, not super important. Don't really need it. You can focus on other things. Coming back to empowered attacks and war cries, here is an introduction of a notable that is really important, which is war cries empower an additional attack. So if you're looking at including war cries and empowered attacks into your core builds and you're trying to calculate your DPS, you have to worry about uptime. By default, you're normally going to get like 1 or 2 empowered attacks whenever you use a war cry. This guarantees an additional attack. So if you're trying to get every single attack to be empowered, this is a huge benefit. The nodes over here, sometimes the war cry and empowered wheels also share with like war cry damage, which doesn't scale your skill damage, just war cries. Don't worry about that. We are also at a point now where we're introduced to a new concept, which is fully broken armor. So in PoE 2, you can break enemies' armor, which as you lower their armor, you're going to be doing more physical damage. But once you fully break their armor, you actually apply a debuff to enemies, which is 20% more physical damage taken. And this node right here increases that effect. So 30% of the 20% more damage is going to be around 6% more. So this notable is just 6% more damage on any enemy with fully broken armor. This wheel also has an alternative path that takes you to increased magnitude of ailments you inflict. So this is just an increased modifier for damage over time effects, ignite, bleed, poison. If you're interested in going a damage over time effect as your main skill, this is the mechanic that you want to focus on to juice your damage for that. In PoE 2, all of those effects also scale off of your base hit, so it still is important to have a large hit up front. But being able to scale a separate modifier, which is not in the same increased damage pool, but is instead in its separate sort of increased magnitude pool, means that you can get your dots doing a lot of damage with a good amount of investment. Getting to the bottom of the tree here, you're going to be introduced to some of the more core mechanics to warrior slam builds, which is primarily what I go and what I'll be talking about. Right here we have Split the Earth, which introduces the concept of Aftershocks. So 10% chance for slam and strike stills to cause an aftershock, which is essentially, if you're familiar with PoE 1, dealing double damage. So when you use a slam, once it goes off, there's a chance for it to just go off a second time. It's a huge damage multiplier. You can think of it again as double damage, which is going to be more damage. Scale separate from increased, scale separate from more. It's just incredibly strong. If you continue to path up, we can come back to Skull Crusher, which again is a more multiplier on heavy stunned enemies. We also have a new wheel to 0.3, which is really strong. It's mostly increased damage. However, there is an effect here that on heavy stunning a rare or unique, your next attack within 4 seconds is Ancestrally Boosted. That you can get on support gems, you can get with the Titan Ascendancy, or you can get with this node. and it is a more multiplier on that specific hit. It's 30% more, I believe. If you don't have the support gem, or if you aren't running Titan, you could definitely run it on top of certain support gems as well. We could pull that up real quick. So Fist of War 3 increases the damage of Ancestral boosts. So Ancestral boost has double effect on supported skills. Technically, you could run this on one of your skills. You could take this node, and I believe anytime you heavy stun a rare or unique, I think you'd get the benefit of the Fist of War 3. But again, this is more of a high level, not necessarily a deep dive. Can confirm that through other sources. The rest of this wheel is just increased area of effect, but again, still strong, and introducing this concept of Ancestral Boosted. It's very strong for warriors, especially if you're using it with skills that you're not using all that often. So Hammer of the Gods, if you have like a single target setup just for bossing, like Rolling Slam's really strong. Ancestral boosting them is a really good way to increase the damage of an attack you're not clearing the map with. Something else I did kind of skip by is Rage. So this wheel right here, while not an offensive layer necessarily, this first point actually doubles the duration, or the inherent rage loss starts 1 second later. Normally the base is 1 second, so this boosts it up to 2 seconds. So this point as just like a singular point if you're having rage issues, really nice. But if you keep going, it actually gets to a maximum rage increase at the end here. How rage works is every point of rage you have is just a 1% more attack damage modifier. And again, more attack damage is king. Once you get up to your max rage, if you're constantly at max rage, then increasing your maximum cap is just going to be a more multiplier on your damage, so it's pretty strong. This wheel is not the best. This is more for kind of quality of life. But again, introducing these concepts kind of as we pass through the tree. So we talked about increasing the magnitude of ailments for dot builds, but in order to apply those dots, you're going to have a chance to bleed. So there are a few nodes right here that increase your chance to bleed while nearby. These are for empowered attacks. You don't necessarily need to force it. Down here, you have a bit more chance to bleed on the tree, as well as you being able to get this from either your gear or your jewels. I think it's primarily, you might be able to get it from uniques, but I believe this is primarily from the tree, your jewels, or just straight up a support gem. But again, bleed is a very strong addition to any normal sort of strike or a slam build. You can just kind of splash it in if you want, or you can make it the entire focus of your build, put all of your investment into it, and try to scale it up that way. These are the closest nodes while you're leveling if you want to just splash it in, and then we can get to the full bleed wheels later. So if you path further north from this bottom point, you're going to hit a bunch of fire nodes. This introduces the concept of damage penetration as well as ignite. So flammability, magnitude, as well as damage with hits against ignited enemies. Flammability is what causes your hits to have a chance to ignite, essentially. You also have, once again, gain physical damage as extra damage over here. Very strong. But ignite is a very strong ability in the game. If you want to scale it as like the core feature of your builds, you can take Avatar of Fire to convert most of your damage to fire. And if you have a skill that already does some conversion, this can get you a full conversion from Fizz to Fire. You do not need chance to ignite, I don't think, anymore. It's just this flammability magnitude. This was introduced in 0.3. If we come back to the start, I believe there's some fire magnitude. This is damage penetrates again. The top side, there's flammability magnitude. So this is going to increase your chance to ignite. Another pretty fundamental concept for melee is the idea of accuracy. Resolute technique will double your accuracy rating and make you not crit. If you don't really care about crits, this is easy. They also introduced this node here, which is a few increased accuracy points and then nibble strength. So gaining accuracy equal to your strength is pretty big if you are scaling Giant's Blood, or if you just have a ton of strength for the life. You can get around like 400, 500 on most builds pretty easily, and this will get you an equal amount of accuracy for that. They changed how the accuracy works in 0.3, where it's way higher for melee. So you may only need accuracy if you're trying to use something like long-ranged abilities, Sunder, Molten Blast, stuff like that can hit enemies at a long distance. If you're just using slams or attacks that you're like right up in their face, accuracy isn't too big of a problem. So taking either of these approaches kind of fixes it for you, especially in the early game. If we keep coming down here, there is a new concept that you might not be familiar with, which is damage with hits is lucky against heavy stunned enemies. So all that means is when you're rolling damage, it's always a range. You have the low end and you have the top end, and it picks a number between those two. When you hit with when damage with hits is lucky, it just rolls that damage number twice and then takes the higher of the two. So if you're familiar with advantage from D&D, that's basically what this is. This is introduced and become more mainstream in other sort of roguelike games, so shouldn't be too confusing for players. And you can use tools like Path of Building that I'm showing this off in order to maybe calculate how much of a damage increase this would be for your build. And then one of the final concepts I want to cover is Culling Strike. So Culling Strike just basically chops off a bit of HP from the enemy once they get below 10%, I think, or, you know, it's a scaling value based on the enemy's rarity. It just kills them. So if you hit them and it takes their life below that value, they instantly die. It's a very strong pickup if you can get it with little investment. I haven't been focusing on it as much in PoE 2, but it is something that has always been around and is great if you can splash it into your builds. So now I'm just going to go over typing in the different layers just so you can get a feel for how available they are on the tree. What I'm typing in right now is increased damage. So you're going to notice that increased damage is the most plentiful type of damage increase on the tree, right? It's the reason why out the gate you're going to take these points and then maybe move away from them later is because out the gate these are very valuable when you have no increased damage. But later in the game, if you have, you know, these wheels, this wheel, etc., it's going to open up the possibility for you to spec out of it and pick up some points here if you want to. Something like this is a possible endgame build, especially for pathing up or down. Anyways, so again, increased damage, the most plentiful. Not all of these are for the same damage type. Most of these are going to be increased damage. Some of these that are getting caught are related to crit, related to thorns, but it is still the most abundant even when you filter those out. When we talk about extra damage, it is not very common on the tree, but it does exist in different forms. Gain fizz damage as extra fire. There are two notables close by. There's a few more up top. Empowered attacks gain fizz as extra fire. There are support gems that do this as well. So not super common, but anytime you get this or have access to this, it's a very good pickup. When we're talking about Aftershocks, again, we have the nodes down here, Splitters and Mace Aftershock Chance. We also have the new Behemoth notable, which is very strong. And then we have a notable here that it only increases the area of effect, doesn't increase the chance to Aftershock. But again, as you see, the further we get into the more niche mechanics, the less available they are on the tree. But all that means is that these nodes are just more valuable if you're going to splash them into your builds. Pathing to them and taking advantage of them while you can is going to be pretty important for increasing your damage. Up next is Armor Break. So Armor Break has a lot of notables, or a good amount of notables on the tree, but they're more related to breaking armor. So like increasing the chance of, or increasing the armor broken. This isn't too important. You can get very high armor break with certain skills. Shattering Blow is a really strong notable if you're trying to break armor without any other effect. You can essentially heavy stun an enemy, and then if you have enough increased armor break, On the rest of your tree, it will instantly break the armor of any heavy stunned enemy for you. These notables down here are the ones that relate to fully broken armor. So Pylon, Punctured Lung, and Irreparable. That's just increasing the armor break duration, which makes it easier for you to eventually stack up fully armor break. Again, down here, these are the more hybrid nodes. This is underneath the mercenary section of the tree. So breaking armor while pinning an enemy isn't going to be super important for warriors. The new notable that does matter is the Molten's One's Gift, and this relates to how fully broken armor is normally just a physical damage increase. If you take this notable, it turns it into also a fire damage increase. So this is huge if you're going either a full fire or a hybrid builds. I believe in order to break armor, you need to do physical damage. So if you want to use fully broken armor with a full fire setup, you're going to need to figure out a way around that. Up next is Ancestral Boost. It is just this wheel. We already went over it entirely, and maybe they'll add some more stuff on the tree, given that Titan seems to be having some updates there. But again, if you're interested in using it out, definitely pat down here. It should be, most warriors are going to take this strength node and close by. Just try it out, see if you like guided hands, see if you like channeled heritage and this kind of every so often doing a massive AoE. Just see if you like that playstyle. When we're talking about rage, there are a good amount of nodes on the tree. Again, Unforgiving is just a bit max rage, as well as making the quality of life of losing rage a little bit easier on you. Sudden Infuriation is just a chance to get max rage here. Prolonged Fury, again, quality of life, as well as rage gain on hit. If you have no other ways of gaining rage, taking at least 1 point here, you're going to slowly stack it up, as well as the rage gain on hit down here. These notables are in-game, but you can't get access to axes at the moment. I think this is just to let us know that axes are going to be maybe the maximum rage mechanic. Sword's probably going to go crit. The wheel down here is mostly max rage, and it's nearby a good amount of where warriors come, especially for the 0.3 meta Viper cap. Rage also has the concept of rage gain when you're hit by enemies. It's pretty strong if you have no other ways to generate rage. The effect that rage also grants increased stun threshold is also really strong if you have no other sources of that on the tree. But overall, rage isn't too core of a mechanic. Again, just something that you can splash into any builds depending on where you are on the passive tree. Vengeful Suffering up here increases your armor by how much rage you have. Strong, but not too many people are scaling max rage, so again, if you can splash it, and go ahead, but otherwise don't focus on it too much. So Bleed, once again, when we look at Bleed down the straight path, not too much access to it. You'd have to cut down a little bit further, but there are huge increases down here. You have Aggravating Bleed, which increases it by 100%, essentially just times 2 damage on Bleed, as well as just a ton of notables here for Chance, Duration, and Magnitude. Down here as well, Bleeding you inflict deals damage faster. It's just a concept of increasing the DPS of the bleed, not necessarily the total damage done. So most builds, if you're going to be going Bleed, they probably don't path that way still. You could do something like this. Come down here, take Giant's Blood, and then continue pathing like this. If you go some type of hybrids, you can cut through this way. But overall, normally the access to these notables down here comes with pathing along the bottom of the tree at the moment. So when we're looking at Ignite, if I type Ignite in, there aren't too many nodes. If I type in Flammability, pops up a few more. But so again, if we're talking about, there's one close to the start, as well as a few nodes over here. If you keep going north, you're going to get access to a bunch more fire notables. So the enemies ignited by you permanently take increased damage for each second they have ever been ignited by you, up to 10%. So this is a 10% increased damage taken. This would be in the same group of damage types as the fully armor broken. It's essentially a debuff on the enemy. Immolation, again, just increased fire mag. So when we look at crit, There are a few notables close by. Crit damage as well as crit bonus damage. This wheel comes with reduced, I think it's reduced maximum mana for both of these. Not exactly sure why, but they did pair that up with crit. If we keep going down here, more generic crit, but eventually you do see specific to one-handers. So I'm not sure if they're going exactly for some type of one-hander crit builds over two-hander, but either way, not too much access to it on the tree for warriors. You're going to see crit as more of a dex thing, as well as, I guess, crit on spells. But yeah, warriors, instead of crit, are mostly focused on Aftershocks right now, which is double damage. I think crit's going to be way more of a factor once they introduce swords to the game. All right, we're going to look at Empower now. Empower, again, a good amount of notables and a good amount of them are close by. Your core path here. Can swing and grab this while you're playing through a campaign if you want. Very strong. You can swing up here, further increase your damage. This is fine for increasing empowered damage, as well as taking over Warcry cooldowns. If you're dealing with too long of Warcry cooldowns, etc., you can just take this wheel real quick. And then if you want to do bleed as well as empowered attacks, this is a really good pickup as well. The notables that I'm not too familiar with because I believe they're new. Life leached from empowered attacks is instant. We have empowered attacks have more stun buildup, so higher chance of stunning the enemies with them, or like higher stun buildup, as well as damage is increased for each different Warcry you've used recently. This is more something that existed in PoE 1, where you're kind of like doing a piano build with a bunch of different Warcries. But for PoE 2, none of these are probably that needed. Just something that maybe for pathing by here you can try out, but I wouldn't recommend it. So skill speed and attack speed, same type of modifier. Right out the gate you have access to skill speed if you want it. There's skill speed over here, but these notables might get pulled. And then there's skill speed a little bit further on the tree. But when it comes to attack speed, you have a bit more variety here. Attack speed for one-hander. Two-handers get normally reduced attack speed. These two notables come with reduced attack speed. But if you go more towards mercenary, there is just straight up attack speed on the tree. Small notables, as well as the larger notables. Again, attack speed. Again, another wheel with attack speed on it. As well as conditional attack speed. So attack speed if you've been hit, if you're mapping, really strong. Further down here, increased attack speed. So although everybody has been bitching about the reduced attack speed on the tree, GGG has done a good job of adding a bunch more just flat or like other attack speed opportunities to sort of offset it. So if you do get to a point where you're sick of how slow you're attacking, you can invest in attack speed and hopefully feel a little bit better about your play. When we look at accuracy, these are going to be your primary focus, so Resolute Technique or Nimble Strength. You do have access to True Strike here, but this is like a good anoint in the early game if you need dex and accuracy. Normally not going to path over there. Again, accuracy at close range, which is already we have a shit ton, so these probably aren't as needed. Any combo where you're gaining attack speed and accuracy is probably decent, but normally just focus on one of these two options and then just go with it. When we look at Lucky, Lucky is not very common. So this is Lucky against enemies that are heavy stunned. This is 30% chance for lightning with hits to be Lucky. These are defensives. And then this is the damage with hits is Lucky against enemies that are on low life. There was a unique that made enemies always count as low life for a while. This was really strong with that. But since that doesn't exist anymore, now it's back to being a conditional. Again, not a lot of sources for this on the tree or in the game as a whole. So if you do care about exploring this, Perfect Opportunity is probably going to be the way you go. And then to wrap it up with Culling Strike. Not many nodes for warriors. Again, just hits that heavy stun. Have Culling Strike. This would be probably for essentially clearing out normal and magic mobs and maps. Not going to be super helpful for rares and uniques. Culling Threshold is a stat that increases the you know, if it's 10% normally and then you increase the thresholds, maybe you can get a 15% or 20%, but not too important for warriors. As you can see, the availability is limited. So again, we briefly covered all of these mechanics. I didn't explain damage over time as much, and I didn't explain any of these mechanics really in depth because that's not the point of this video. This video in particular, I want to go over the layers, lay them out, and then end it by showing off a really simple path for maybe a starter warrior, and why I go it as I'm leveling, as well as introducing the different layers of damage as we get there. So I set up my character with a weapon. We're looking at Mace Strike, and I'm going to go through the points again, showing off the actual values of increased damage you're going to get. At the start here, we're at 12 DPS. Booming in Act 1, that's a ton of damage. If you pass, again, through these 5 nodes and then take the next 4 over here, it's going to go up to 26, which is essentially a bit more than double damage for just these notables. If you click on Heavy Stunned in POB, you're going to get that giant 40% increase from Smash. But again, with the damage numbers you see here, it doesn't matter if you're early game or late game. If these are the only ones that you take on the tree, huge increase in damage. Going to come down here. If you take either of these notables, you can. I'm going to keep pathing. Let's just focus on damage. So once again, we're at 26 DPS. We're going to put 4 points in these notables that do more increased damage. And instead of doubling our damage, this is about doing 1.5x damage. And the reasoning is because we already have so much increased damage, the effectiveness of it starts to kind of wear down. So if you over-index in one type of damage, it's not necessarily the best way to go about adding offensive layers, right? You want to kind of expand and don't over-index. So this is normally where I would stop taking increased damage while going through the campaign. You can come down here. When we talk about taking Aftershocks, POB has no concept of Aftershock, but this is a 10% more damage modifier. You can think of it. This would be 18% more damage. And then these notables along the way are just increased damage. These are really strong regardless. Into a 20% more damage. So when we're talking about 20%, we're doing 40 DPS. If we click on Heavy Stun, this is going to include extra damage, but it's a big upgrade, especially if you have multiple layers that are modified by certain conditionals. If we're talking about slam builds while leveling, I might just leave it there. You could take Guided Hand if you want to try Ancestrally Boosted without any support gems. Again, if you want to do the weapon swap, you can just come down here, pick one for weapon set 1, pick one for weapon set 2. But again, as we've shown, just with this set of nodes on setup, you're basically dealing, 4 times damage, or 5.5 times damage to heavy stunned enemies throughout the campaign. At this point, you're going to be around end of Act 2, start of Act 3. The next sort of scaler for damage when it comes to slam builds or strike builds is probably going to come from Giant's Blood, getting plus level to melee gems on your two-handers, either dual-wielding two-handers or having a just two-hander in your main hand, as well as having a shield for defenses, which will then just, take the, again, we're doing like 4 times damage on average at this point. That could easily take it up to another like 5 times or 6 times damage from where you initially start. If we start introducing the concept of Rage, you're going to have another 30% more damage. If we bring in the concept of extra damage and empowered damage, we're going to be introducing Infernal Cry, Seismic Cry. Seismic Cry is just double damage on your next empowered attack. Infernal Cry is a bunch of extra damage, which again at this stage in the game would be more damage. So, we can pull it up. I don't know exactly what level Infernal Cry you'll have at this point in the campaign, but the extra damage scales up to, at level 20, 50% damage as extra fire damage. If we bump it down to, let's say, like level 8, you're looking at 37% extra damage, which again is huge. So when you're going through campaign, although you're looking at this passive tree, you might think, warrior feels weak, the passive tree feels weak. If it's as simple as taking some kind of setup like this and then using your cooldowns in the right way, and you're going to end up doing like 10 times as much damage as you normally would if you weren't going certain nodes on the tree without realizing it. You can also, again, introduce the armor break mechanic. All of these factors play together. All of these layers take the base damage, which was initially like 12 DPS or something, and then it's just multiplier after multiplier after multiplier, and you end up to the point where you're one-shotting bosses. This is, at the moment, why PoE 2 feels a little rough around the edges. There's a lot of different mechanics, and we can kind of show that off by pulling up PoE Ninja and just seeing where players normally take certain skills. When we're talking about PoE Ninja, you can sort by class. I'm going to go Titan. It's way more played than Smith of Kitava this league. And then here you can show passive Heatmap. What this is going to do is it's going to highlight the most commonly taken path on the tree. And again, you can see the tree that I've showed off is essentially like very common. And it's going to be way more common initially as you come down here. Like I was talking about when we were presenting like bleed / magnitude. Normally when you are pathing to the bottom of the tree, you're going to hit this node on the left and then come down. You're not normally going to cut through unless you're going hybrid. Not super common right now. But what I want to point out with this tree is how often people are foregoing certain notables. So again, even just these two notables, Split the Earth and Mace Aftershock Chance. If I want to get more in depth, we can actually check exactly which skills players are taking. If they're taking slams, this number should be way up. If we're talking about Skull Crusher, this number should be way up. Heavy stunned enemies are constant, like you can constantly stun everything in the game. The guided hand notable as well is not taken at all really right now. It's super easy to get, super easy to just splash into your build. And for as much people bitch that warrior's attack speed is so slow, if we look on the tree, again, the skill speed taken, 1/4 of the time. This new notable that maybe people don't even realize is there, only 12% of the time. The attack speed wheels over here. This one is so low, 5%. We're talking about 10% taken. Again, 10% taken. So even though players bitch about certain things, they don't, when it's available, they're not going for it, right? You can make an incredibly high attack speed warrior right now, but players just don't do it, right? So what I'm trying to do with this video is to explain the mechanics, the offensive layers, what is there and what you have access to, and just try it. Just give it a go yourself. Figure out if you can make these builds work with all of these layers instead of just kind of listening to what everybody else is telling you. My own opinion on the warrior class and its strengths is mine. I don't need to, I don't need to convince you that, oh, this is an incredibly strong class. It's really fast. It's incredibly broken. But my struggles lately have been with people saying that the classes are shitty, when in reality, I feel like they're really strong. But again, that's my opinion. I've been playing it. I've been really enjoying it. And I think 0.3 Warrior is actually the strongest it's ever been, on top of the fact that they added sprinting to the game. So if you're playing soft core and you can just sprint everywhere, it's really fun compared to like 0.1, where everybody's walking around. Everything is super slow. There's not really a lot of attack speed available. So we've come a very far, we've come a long way from the start of PoE 2, that's for sure. So that's going to do it for me. Again, I was trying to keep this high level. I'm not as versed in damage over time builds, ignite builds. That's something I want to work on in the future, bleed builds. When we're talking about what kind of videos I'm going to make in the future, this is more of the style that I think I want to go for. Although I do probably want to slot in at least like one React video a week if I'm like trying to keep up with the trends. At the moment, I don't want to be the guy who's always negative about stuff. The only issue is that I'm receiving negativity from all of the content creators that are saying ranged is number one, melee is completely shitty. It's just not true, right? I don't know what metrics they determine when we're talking about what is best, what is good enough. it feels like there is no concept of good enough in PoE 2. It feels like if you're not the fastest thing in the game, then there's no point in running that class. To me, that doesn't make any sense, especially now that I've played through a hardcore solo self-found warrior all the way up to, I think we're like level 84. I've had some of the most fun I've had playing PoE 2 doing that playstyle. And it's built off of what I learned in playing softcore, right? Everything that I learned about crafting in softcore, I then took and applied to solo self-found. I knew what goals I needed to hit. I knew how to craft the weapon that was going to boost my damage to that next level. And it really made the game enjoyable in a way that I didn't experience when I was playing softcore. And I was just seeing video after video saying, oh, ranged #1, warrior super slow. On top of the fact that 0.31 has introduced a change in the end game. All right, there's no concept of now you have to clear a bunch of nodes, map nodes as fast as possible in order to path to like triple tower setups. Right, that's gone. So speed isn't nearly as important. People are going to still tell you that it's the single most important stat in the game, and I will cover that in a future video. Again, today is offensive layers. Next up is probably defensive layers, and then eventually we'll do quality of life. So quality of life comes from, it's going to come from the movement speed, the area of effect, slow, potency reduction, curse reduction, all that kind of good stuff. That once you get enough damage in PoE 2, you just don't need to spec into damage anymore. So enjoy, look for that in a future video. Hopefully, if you stuck around, like, subscribe. I'm really trying to grow the channel. I'm really trying to do a more positive sort of outlook on the game in moving forward, and share these videos with anybody who's interested in playing warrior class. Leave any comments you want in the description below, and then when it comes to asking questions, that's what the live stream is good for. If I'm live, jump on, ask any question you want. I'll probably pause the gameplay, answer, go through exactly what's going on with the warrior class. And yeah, again, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.